I'd like to thank you all for hanging out for part 2 of our Tourism Business Improvement District Advisory Board meeting. I would like to establish a quorum. I'm here, Charles Yates, Chair. I've got Steve Allen here next to me. Chris Kosteka is here. I also have Nancy Dickinson, thank you. Amish Patel's here. I've got Joan and Isaac Sue. Joan Solu, thank you. Thank you all for being here. My board, I'm pretty proud of these people working hard, volunteering to come here and do this for all of Morro Bay. As we call this meeting to order, I'd also like to pause for a moment of silence. So please take that moment and reflect. Thank you. If we could all stand and face the American flag, please. And we recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. First, I'd like to open any board member announcements. Coming from my board, does anybody have anything to announce today?
I'd just like to announce to the community that the Morro Bay High School boys varsity golf team were outright CIF, outright league champions. So straight out, took the title this year for the first time in a long time. So congratulations to Morro Bay High School boys varsity golf. Yeah.
Do we have staff announcements? No staff announcements. I'd like to open the floor to any public comment, and I think the public comment mic is you. She's got it. Liz has got it here. Public comment.
Hello. Me. No, yes, please.
I had a quick public comment on item B2, just because I have to go to work. That deals with the general fund allocation. And I appreciate you guys kind of letting me talk and then go to work. First off, I don't know if anyone drove around downtown, and there's been no official announcement yet, but the downtown street lights, although not set up in maybe the dream fashion, they are up, and everything was well lit and felt pretty active and happening downtown, even though it's kind of tentatively done. So check that out. I think that's a good thing, and that was enabled in part from about $16,000 of TBID money, which is relatively minimal. And that kind of segues into my comment about item B2 and the general fund allocation. Historically, we're looking at about $150,000 of general fund allocation. That my guess is that this board is going to recommend that $150,000 goes to themselves, naturally. Whether or not that is supported by the city or council is going to depend largely on how that's phrased going back to council. And so as a Morro Bay resident, I know that I would be much more likely to support it if the language was phrased along the lines of the downtown street lighting project and other infrastructure adjacent type improvements to the city. Rather than earmarking these things for general marketing or ad buys or sponsorship or events. I think that I know TBID money is putting heads in beds, or that's the intent. But something as simple as the $16,000 going towards downtown street lighting does that while also making the city better for more than just one day or 2 days. So that's just a plug to kind of massage the language of that general fund allocation request to allow for marketing Morro Bay through tangible assets and permanent improvements rather than single-day events.
Thank you. Now get to work. Any other public comment? Hi, Erica. Seeing none, I think there.
Hey.
Oh, public comment. Val.
Hi, Charlie. I just wanted to say, I've had this discussion with Scott about a parking management plan, and I think that would be a good topic for the for you guys to discuss at some point, sooner better than later. My hotel's down by the water. I see all these cars every summer trying to get in and out from the Rock. There's, one 2-lane road. That's it. And I think it's a real disservice to the people that come and pay money to come to Morro Bay, and and the locals. It's very frustrating. I think we need some other options. The best would be a road through the power plant. If that doesn't work out, I don't know. I guess we need a new bridge across the creek. We need to do something. It gets worse and less safe every year. And if this thing with the boatyard happens and then they got boats hauling across the street too, we're looking at big trouble. It just gets worse every year. I mean, my hotel was built in 2004, and I've been watching it increase every year. One of these days I'm going to get a little microphone out to the cars and go, so, how do you like Morro Bay? While you're sitting in line, It's not good. Anyway, good luck on that.
Thank you, Val. Further public comment? Seeing none, we're going to keep on moving to our consent agenda. Up first, A1. Just asking the board for approval.
Yes, for consent agenda.
For the consent agenda. So I'm looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Calling for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Any nays? Passing the consent agenda. Now we're going to move on to our business items. B1. Jennifer, you're up.
Good morning, board. So I'm here to talk about the February TOT report, and I'm sure all of you have seen that the numbers were down over last year. We had 12 days of rain this February versus 1 day of rain last year, and unfortunately those 12 days, 9 of them fell on weekends, which really makes it hard for incoming guests, a lot of cancellations. So that is one of the significant things I would mention about the February numbers. And the other thing is, the Valentine's Day fell on a Thursday. Last year we did a wine promotion because it was Wednesday, trying to help at least get people over from even just slow for one overnight. We did not do that this year. Restaurant passports did really well. We had 368 redeemed, so that's tracking really well. I was out this week at all the hotels, and I heard from a lot of people that they like the restaurant passport. They think it's stronger than the activity passport that we're doing right now for spring. So just a thought for you for next time. We might want to relook at that after we get the spring numbers back as well. Can I answer any other questions or any thoughts?
Board comments? Is it time for the board? Good morning. Yeah, I know that we have a future agenda item for the TOT report, the information that we're going to get to come back, and I think we might be seeing that next month. But I get that we had more days of rain, and we're very weather dependent here, very weather dependent. But Highway 1 is open now. I know that there's a gate at Highway 1, and Highway 1 closes intermittently when it rains, but I feel like the opportunity when the gate opens is an opportunity to say we're open, especially because Morro Bay is the last incorporated, city. It is the gateway, the city gateway to Big Sur. But I am concerned that, the hotel revenue was so far off. And vacation rentals were down. I'm talking about year over year. I mean, the loss in revenue, we posted total receipts of $1,225,000 versus last year $1,469,000. That's actually people, not. I want the community to understand that means a loss of people coming into our community. And those people commodities are lost to our retailers and to our restaurants too. And yes, we are very weather dependent, but then we should probably look at February again as an opportunity month when we talk about events coming up and those things. What can we do in February that we can do consistently? Because we continue to lose in this month, and it's really important. It's got Valentine's Day, it's got President's Day weekend. It's a huge opportunity month for us. So instead of looking at it in terms of loss, I'd like us to look at it in terms of being open and what the opportunities are for the board to support to get it forward, because that's a lot of people share and a lot of revenue. Because if you look at the next page, which has the STAR report comparison, and I know Jennifer usually shows us the reels on this, which we tend to trend higher when the real numbers are in. Is that right? We tend to trend higher when the real numbers are in. But I would love to see at least once a year a side-by-side comparison reporting all of the TOT, like Pismo Beach against Morro Bay, because if we tend to trend higher on STAR, they probably will too. So I'd like to see something in the future where we get the reality of this, so we can see how Morro Bay is doing as a whole. Because one of the areas for growth is obviously going to be adding new rooms and how we market those new rooms. Salty Sisters is coming on. So what trends do we have as a community coming forward? What trends can the board hit on to stabilize February and other months like it going forward? So those are my comments about the TOT report.
Jen, I know our properties up north were off too, so I think a lot of this is weather dependent for February. If I'm reading this correctly, though, San Luis Obispo RevPAR actually went up year-to-year comparison. Do we know possibly?
According to STAR. So that's not 100% of their rooms, but.
Do we know what the anomaly was there?
They have more rooms open. They opened like another 100 rooms.
So that
Yeah.
improved the RevPAR?
Yeah.
Okay.
Occupancy went down. They increased their rate with some new inventory with higher rated rooms. Got it.
Jen, staying on that same topic, it was brought up earlier too. I would like to think that in these meetings is our perfect time where we discuss the challenges like Scott talked about, and the situation that we talked about, like there's not enough to do, and those sites should be talked about in this room. But I hope as hoteliers, restaurants, and anybody involved in the tourism industry, that our focus to our customers and our tourists is all the things we do have to do. Because most of our activities here are just naturally given. You know, of all the activities at our hotel that people walk around, they talk about the otters that they see in the, called the sanctuary, right? No, what do you call it? The birth? No. Yeah, one part.
Nursery.
The nursery, and again, the beaches, and going out to Montaña de Oro, and those type of opportunities that are just there. And that's where our focus needs to be with those people. And then behind the scenes, we're working on the challenges to create even more opportunities.
So can I give you guys some updates on a few things really quick? So the WSL contest that we had not formally committed, but we recommended that we would like to support it with $10,000 is coming February 27th through March 1st, 2020, and that would be a consistent yearly event. So it's several days.
Can you tell them what it is?
So this is
WSL
the
people
World
may
Surf
not-
League.
okay.
World Surf League. They do a contest in Pismo Beach as well, and they wanted to pick up a second one. So if you're a fledgling surfer that wants to go pro, you have to have so many points to go pro. And they only have, most of the contests that they can get points at are international. And a lot of kids don't have the money to travel internationally. And so this group out of Pismo has started these contests with the intention of getting California, Florida, Texas, those surfers here to earn points for going professional. So it's a good thing. It's a really good thing, and it'll be every year. It's backed by the World Surf Federation, which is really good. So it's not just like a local event. So it's pretty exciting, yeah. So that's February. But again, it's long term. We tried to get them to bring it in this year, and they just couldn't do it. So, yep.
I think that is one of the things is a multi-day sporting event highlighting our beach is something that we just don't have. The Big Bad and Ugly, is a great one, but I think that this is going to really draw some big international attention to us. So it should be a lot of fun.
And I'm also trying to get a film, like a week-long film show to come here. We've talked with the Bay, and they're totally open to work around their scheduled time. So we have all the days open on weekdays. So we have good opportunities. We just have to find the partnerships that can bring it in. Okay?
Moving on to B2, Scott Collins.
Thank you, Chair and Board. I did have a PowerPoint, but I lost the disc, so you're going to have to bear with me. But I think a lot of you did see the presentation on April 9th, and I will provide it orally. There's not a lot of slides that were up there anyhow, but I did provide 2 handouts. They're also in the back. One is the listing of events that were funded and the amounts they were funded at for this current fiscal year. And then also on a recommendation from one of the board members is to actually bring out the detailed budget that was the adopted budget for this current year, so you understand the interplay of all the things that you fund, at least on a line item level, and how that relates back to the general fund allocation. Because certainly you could, if you want to do events and the general fund allocation is limited this year, you certainly could look at other parts of your existing budget that's funded through the assessment. So just want to note that. So back to the staff report. The recommendation is for the board to review different options for the general fund allocation amount that is provided by the city to tourism, with the intention of kind of insinuating what you're already doing, and it's been the history to provide funding for events. And as Sean Green mentioned, this year, which is a new thing, was putting targeted investments into infrastructure for longer term gain. That was something that the city council had discussed last year as they were developing the budget, to look at the general fund allocation maybe is in terms of its reduction or maybe different or better use. And one of those discussion points was physical infrastructure improvements. So it was really good to see that come to fruition this year. But back to the report, I know we have some new members, so go through this. The City Council approved resolution number 316 back in 2016. That was after pretty lengthy conversations in the community about bringing tourism marketing into the city. I had gone through various iterations in the community, and the city took responsibility for managing promotions and marketing after that point. And within the resolution 316, there was a commitment made by the city. Now, this is not a legally bound document, but it was a commitment nonetheless that the city would provide $60,000 in general fund money every year, plus 20% over TOT collections that exceed $3 million. We've seen that number increase since the city has taken ownership of the marketing efforts, up to the point where it's about $150,000 this fiscal year. Those funds, as I mentioned, have been used primarily for grants, but as the allocation has grown, it's also taken on things like covering traveling journalists' expenses to really incentivize them to come to Morro Bay, to provide a different look and view. It doesn't have the same feel as an advertisement, because they ground themselves in the city for a few days and really get to know folks, go to specific restaurants and really tease out some of the more interesting components of our community. And we've seen our public, seen those stories published in major publications that really get folks to understand what the charm that we have and as it was mentioned, the naturally given things to do in our community. Those things are really brought to light. And then this year, the little improvements like the downtown tree lighting and a few other things that have been supported. As I mentioned before, there was discussion at the city council level last year in developing the fiscal year 18-19 budget, and even discussion about maybe eliminating or reducing the general fund allocation due to some budget concerns, or maybe reallocating to infrastructure improvements entirely. But council felt it was wise to maybe pause on that and really send it back to the TBID to have a discussion and engage with stakeholders, understanding that commitments have been made in the past about that money. Again, not legally bound, but it was something that was made as part of the move into the city. So moving into the next fiscal year, 1920, I mentioned this in the meeting earlier today. We do face challenges, not unique to us, but ours are significant. We are facing a $325,000 deficit looking into next year. That number grows and grows and grows each successive year out. Not because the city isn't trying really hard to reduce our expenses, and not because our economy isn't doing well. It's really things that we have no control over. Our pension liability keeps growing. We have to fund the unfunded liability that remains from the faltering of the returns on their investment. So we have our part to do in that. We hope the state eventually gets their act together and looks at reform of our pension, but we have, again, no control over that other than advocating for that change. So in the meantime, we have to grapple with these deficits, and $325,000, while not huge, is something we need to look at seriously. So the discussion at council a couple weeks ago was, from a staff side, recommending, that we look at the general fund allocation since it had been brought up last year. We're looking at options to either reduce or eliminate, and any funds that were reduced or eliminated from the general fund allocation would be used to go right back into economic development. We do typically fund about $100,000 to $150,000 in general fund economic development activity. Wayfinding is one of the things we're looking at. Highway 1 signage needs to be improved. Those are things we're looking at. Investing in our economic development strategic plan implementation is key. I mentioned some of the things like high-speed internet. Really getting into the businesses and understanding what their needs are. How can the city help facilitate those things? How can we help invest in our infrastructure? Those are seriously important things because they have long-term ramifications, and we are working towards diversifying not only what's in our lodging community, but what's in our overall economy, and those things benefit the tourist industry anyways. If we have more vitality, it only helps you. So there's no right or wrong answer. It's a tension point that we're grappling with. But our view is that we don't want to reduce services to the community because they are already razor thin. We aren't bloated. We are razor thin. I mean, we've reduced staff since I've got here, and again, the demands keep going up. So we're trying to find a way to balance all these things. And again, this is one of those opportunities to have a good dialogue with TBID about. Council didn't specify what should occur so much as had a good discussion about what the options are. The first option was to look at outright elimination of the general fund allocation to TBID. That's probably worth about $150,000 or a little bit more next year. The other option was to maybe just do something for 1 year and just see how it goes, and then come back next year and see if things improve, or if there's such a detriment to tourism efforts that wasn't a wise decision, or somewhere in the middle, maybe funding the baseline amount of $60,000 for next year and then reassessing the year out, or maintaining the general fund in its entirety. There's not necessarily any right or wrong answer, but those are options that council looked at, and there was discussions about the virtues of funding special events because there's a community aspect to that. There is a strategic investment aspect to that, as we heard earlier today in the annual stakeholder meeting. There's also support for the traveling journalists and infrastructure improvements. So it's sort of across the board, and council didn't specify which they wanted to go. They really wanted to hear from this board first before taking action moving forward. So those were the discussion points. As I mentioned, there's those 2 handouts that have all the grants that are been funded for this current year. 23 of them, on average, is about $3,500. So we understand some of these events do rely heavily on that, and others, they are successful in and of themselves and probably could not necessarily live without it, but it wouldn't be a detriment to them. So it's sort of a mixed bag. And again, that was one of the discussion points during the strategic plan, was to look at this. Should we be investing $3,500 in 23 events, or should we be investing maybe a bigger chunk in 1 or 2 to hit those targeted months like Joan was mentioning earlier. And then there's the budget that outlines kind of the line items to really help understand what the rest of the budget is funded or how it's funded, so that there's definitely interplay with the general fund. The other aspect to consider is that we are working through the vacation rental RV discussion about bringing them into the T-bid. That probably will conclude and come back to this board in the fall or late summer, so we won't make the annual assessment period, but there's certainly opportunities to do it in mid-year. I think you probably have heard there is a willingness for vacation rentals to join, and maybe RVs as well, and that could help offset some reduction if there was one to the general fund. So that just to help tee up the conversation, we would be looking for, if possible, consensus, or for votes to direct something back to council in terms of a recommendation, and happy to answer any questions.
Good report. Thank you, Scott. I think I speak for the whole board when I say we appreciate the candor and having an open dialogue. Can you walk us through, when you say a potential $325,000 deficit, is the city carrying a reserve fund, and those funds would just be drawn from there then?
Yes, if we were to do nothing, you could certainly draw down your general fund reserves. We did set a reserve policy. Council set a reserve policy this year, roughly 25%, 27.5%. He's our numbers guy, the mayor. And that is not necessarily industry standard, but that is a standard for Morro Bay, because we are vulnerable. That represents about a quarter of a year of expenditure, so he carries you through, a significant emergency or natural disaster or man-made caused, or a rupture in the economy. That is somewhat of a higher number than other cities, but it's one that our council felt comfortable with. Similarly, the T-bid set a reserve policy for the accumulation fund, and that is also something that could be looked at as the accumulation fund, if that, to backfill this for a year to see how things go, if that was a choice made by the board. So that's kind of right there, but we are looking at, in the budget, which will be brought forward to the Finance Advisory Committee next week, and then council in May, as some reductions in our equipment, vehicle replacement funds. Again, we're trying to preserve our staff. We are also one of the lower paid agencies in the county, probably, if not the lowest, one of the lowest, and really not trying to cut back on that because, we have really good employees and want to keep them. So that's another tension point, but we do have some opportunities to reduce expenditures that are more on the supply side things, but you can't do that forever either, because then you have vehicles that fall apart, and if you have to replace them on the spot, they're a lot more expensive than doing it more strategically.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Scott, I also appreciate you coming forward today. Of the ideas that are being kicked around regarding those funds, one of those that really wouldn't make a whole lot of sense, I don't think, is the idea of funding it at a certain point with the idea of seeing what negative effect that may cause.
Right.
It takes too long.
Right.
If funds are cut today, we won't know for a couple of years how that plays out. So I don't see that one doing a whole lot.
Okay.
We understand there's a problem. There's a shortage, and so
Fair point. Thank you. Yeah.
I think it's also understandable that a lot of the events that we funded are very local centric, with a lot of, the great events. They do draw some tourism, but a lot of the events that I look at that I helped, I was one of the people voting to support these great events, are local events. And I think that it is an opportunity for us to really take a sharp look at the events that we fund, how they're funded, who's putting them on, and for what reason. I think February, as Joan stated, is a great month to look for an event. However, it's got to be weather protected, so it's going to have to be something that's most likely inside. This is a really difficult challenge for the city, and I know it's difficult for our board to actually think that you guys might take the money away that drives a lot of revenue for the city, a lot of TOT, a lot of sales tax. If these events aren't funded, some will die, and that would be a real It would have a negative effect financially for the city. So I think that there's got to be some compromise, and I think that's where we're headed. That said, I think that we really have our work cut out for us. Question for the city that I have, are there assets that could be liquidated in the city? Does the city own property that's valuable? Are there things out there that could be turned to make a lot more money that could fill this deficit? Just curious.
Yeah, yes, there is. And one in particular that most of you are familiar with is the Stasios building, and that's part of a longer-term strategic initiative to maybe bring, a hotel into town that connects waterfront to the downtown area. We do own some smaller properties, some of that would be incorporated in that project, and some that aren't, but not. We did divest of infrastructure in the past, or assets in the past, I think probably to address similar issues, and sometimes you make those decisions half-cocked, and they're not wise decisions. So that is something we do look at constantly, but we don't own a lot that could turn around quickly to fill a gap, without thinking about the long-term ramifications. Just like you said about, defunding events and understanding that it might take a year or two, or Chris said that, a year or two to really see what the impacts are.
I also want to thank you very much. It's Nancy. It's hard for me to assess, I would love to see a scrubbing of the events to understand the impact, the potential impact on revenue, because there's hopefully a virtuous circle that's happening here, that the events drive revenue, the revenue drives tax income. I was just seconding what Charlie's saying. And so, it would be very hard for me to be able to give any advice on, without some recommendations from you about here's where we estimate impact is going to be the greatest. If we put at risk the Margarita Festival, for instance, what's the potential impact of that? I think I need another granularity of analysis to be able to really give input.
Right. Well, that's a great point, and in order to facilitate that would require, I hate to say the dreaded word, a consultant or an expert in this field to come in and tell you precisely how much the $7,500 that goes to the Avocado Mariga Festival relates back to return on investment. I know that's what people want. I want that too. But we have to be realistic about if we give Project Surf Camp $1,500, how do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think my point here is that when we're looking at the general fund and we're looking at cuts on the general fund, there are things that are just, we have to do without. Right. But when we do without these events, we cut our revenue. So this to me is it's a slippery slope place to cut, because what's the impact that you're going to create on eventual tax revenue that's coming in, if we impact the bookings, if we impact the traffic into the city. So this is the area where I think there's another granularity level of risk that we're taking in making drastic cuts in the budget. While other areas are like, oh yeah, it's okay, we had to stop using a certain truck for a period of time, and it made things a little bit more difficult, right? But that doesn't impact the revenue. So that's why I'm just saying I think that we have to be careful here. Right. We could make more trouble for ourselves if we cut the wrong things. So
right.
I know I'm stating the obvious here.
Right. But. It's a good point, and I know Jen probably wants to say something. I'll let her do that. But I think there's an acknowledgement, at least when our consultant helped us through the strategic plan, that there's too many events that are funded, and there's no strategy here. And I think we all agree with that. One of the recommendations is to not cut the whole thing, is to kind of find compromise, as Charlie said, and that doesn't mean all these events would go away. Maybe that just means not all of them are funded.
Yeah. Right.
And I think we have ideas. We have qualitative analysis, perhaps, on some of these and what the impacts would be. And the flip side of that is, what the funding that would be reduced here would be put right back into economic development. It would just be more global economic development. Mm-hmm. Things that we have acknowledged and spent a lot of money developing plans to tell us what we need to do, but we don't have money to fund it. Unfortunately, we're in a position where we have to make choices. We would love to do both, because I agree the events qualitatively we know they help. Now, how much, like, TOT do they drive? You know, that the precision, we aren't there yet, and I don't know if you could.
Well,
Yeah,
I think a
yeah.
qualitative analysis would be fine.
Yeah.
And, how that qualitative analysis is done, we could discuss. But I think that would be fine. And I think that would be better than nothing.
Right, fair enough.
Yeah.
Good point. And I think Jen wanted to add something. Are you okay, or you wanted to? Yeah.
Since you're new on the board, I just wanted to give you a little background on how the events work. So this was general fund, and so last year the board made a clear definition between community events or tourism-related events. It was clear divide because it was general fund, so we had to look at community things as well. But when the grants come in, they have to go through a process of how many rooms is it going to book, how many days is the event, and then they have to report back out to the board 90 days after their event has finished, and we can see what the room bookings are. And then on our end, the visitor center staff calls the hotels and checks up like the week before the event actually starts to see, because we want to match, what they're reporting, and is it equal or is it similar? So we're just keeping them in check to see how the room counts are looking.
Great, thank
Yeah.
you. That's helpful. So, I mean, is this list from the top event, the most important event, to the least important event?
No,
Is
they're
it-
actually done by date. So
I know.
the order is by date in the year, just so you know.
But could something like that be provided to the board so that we could look at that?
Yeah, I can just give you kind of just a quick overview. I mean, if I took out the community events, it's about $60,000 worth of funding
Okay.
that we did this last year. On top of that, one of the things that is being talked about outside of this is doing a visitor center outreach kiosk situation, which would require more visitor guides to be printed, which would have to be done through general fund money because it would be extensive. It would be like $45,000 to print, 100,000 guides that would be located in downtown and on the Embarcadero in different businesses to be handed out. So, I mean, there's definitely some things to think about.
Okay, thank you.
Nancy, I like those ideas. That being said, you could hire the greatest consultant in the world, and it's such an inexact science. Idea being the San Luis Obispo kids sitting down there on the beach. That's probably leading to no hotel rooms that day. But what it is, it's getting people to fall in love with Morro Bay. So how do you quantitate that? How do you figure out 10 years down the road while they're coming back to Morro Bay, because way back then they fell in love with it. So it's such an inexact science when it comes to tourism. So we do our best job of painting that best picture to make people fall in love with Morro Bay more than just exactly how many room nights come from that event. That being said, I have a kind of a wild and crazy idea, and a little bit of my background, new to the community, only been here 18 months, new to the hotel industry, only 18 months. While that shows that I do not have a lot of experience, sometimes it's better from an outside eye looking at things and saying, how do we get here, or why is it done this way? So when I look at these expenditures for the whole TOT, I'm coming up with a number about, if you can answer one quick question, Jen, the one item that says contractual services, $193,000, is that mostly towards marketing events?
It's probably mainly towards our marketing agency. Their fee is about $160,000, and then you might have, possibly could be the Simple View contract on top of that, which was $40,000. So some of those would be going away. We also
Okay.
had Carl that did the strategic plan. He was $24,000. So this budget will definitely change this next year. It'll free up some liquid cash that we can use towards direct marketing dollars.
Okay, so plus or minus about $600,000 of that money is spent in some form of marketing. I'm just wondering, and also an area that I'm not an expertise, is all this internet marketing. Most of it goes over my head. But you had mentioned before that everybody's getting really competitive and everybody's doing this. I think even down to the smaller businesses and maybe even some of these people on our list that are having events. So an idea that would take a while to implement is maybe our focus goes to a certain amount of our budget is done to global marketing and state. But then we utilize these people, so people could come and present to TBID, why they want to run an event, and most likely even to make a profit, and that'd have to be a city question to charge for these events. But then all these people that are out here doing their own marketing, and over time they show us when they come back and want funding the next year, they're going to say, here's everything we put out. They put a slide presentation together saying we had 40,000 hits here and 50,000 hits here. You know, that story of the crying otter that got so many. Well, these people could be doing that, putting their own things out there. So I'm wondering if more of a focus needs to be, we have a funding problem that may have to cut this, but as a board down the road, that maybe we look to fill our calendar. I think these events, these 22 events that we have here, probably are over 50 days, to where we could work to fill a calendar 300 days with some sort of event. Some tiny, some big, you know, off-season Tuesdays, where people are competing with coming to TOT to say why we should have this on February 17th. You know, why should we give them funding? And then we're looking for them to be providing marketing of the city through that. It's a wild idea. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but maybe it's something we can bring up in future meetings.
I like it.
So, after sitting with Scott, I had a nice meeting with Scott and Jennifer. I actually watched the entire city council meeting that night to watch the conversation. And, you know, I have to agree, the council was all over the place. Everybody values marketing. It was pretty clear that each council member values marketing to present our city in its most beautiful form and in the most positive light that we can possibly get it out there in. But it was all over the place. There was, you know, let's do a one-year moratorium. I would support, another one would support having the travel writers come in. It was all over the place, which is good because then that keeps the opportunity to go. I have to say, after reading the resolution again, I'm not surprised that this has come back to us. I'm disappointed that it was so quick, but I'm not surprised. I think that, you know, we do have, this is a PPP, a public-private partnership. And we have a partnership not only to, I'm just a resident here, not only to the hoteliers who are on this board, but to the rest of the community too. It's a partnership. We're all in this, you know, bubble together. And so, you know, even though we're discussing future of having the vacation rentals come on, the lift has been mostly by the hotels over the last 10 years, and you know that's appreciated by our community. I don't want the hotels to think that that's gone missed. And even through this conversation, I don't want hotels to feel bad that, you know, some things might change here. Yeah, I look at the city's deficit issue of $325,000, and I think $157,000 only gets you part of the way there. There's a big difference between 325 and 150. And so I'm glad to hear from Scott that they're looking at doing other things as well. But I look at, you know, one man's deficit is another girl's opportunity to grow revenue. So that's where I think some creative planning needs to come in. And I've looked at last year's budget, and I think we can scrape that budget to do some things like put the journalists back into our future budget. I think that community event support is very important. I would like to see, I'm going to throw a number out there. I don't want to see it dip any further down than $75,000. Expenses have gone up. Gasoline has gone up. Everything, it's just inflationary. I do think we need to scrape the events. Personally, this is just my personal opinion, I don't think we should support, with this funding, I don't think we should support an event that takes a gate and has a profit. Those, and I think events we support need to be nonprofits. They shouldn't be companies that come in and are for profit. Scraping this and looking on the internet, we have at least one event promoter on here that's a for-profit event promoter, and we supported them with funding. I would scrape them off the list probably immediately. They take a purse, you know, let them do it. If you're going to run your business, I mean, good for them that they got funding from us. That is a way of running your business, I guess, but let's go at it cleanly. In terms of that revenue that I'm suggesting would drop off of here, or that budgeting number that would drop off of here, I would think that it would be really important to this board, after reading the resolution that said that we would also be tasked with forms of economic development. I would strongly suggest to this city and the city council that if they really are serious about growing revenue and squeezing that deficit down, reducing that deficit so we can do things like fill the potholes behind the police department where our very expensive cars and trucks drive. If we're really interested in doing that, what we need to do is take the remaining money that exists here and get serious about adding some hotel rooms in this town and in places within our footprint that already exist. How can we walk into a hotel, like, I'm going to use a Mish because he's all the way down at the other end. Can we use the economic? Let's get a study going on a TOT reinvestment program, what the impact is to the general fund budget, and what the impact is for hotel room growth. Let's use that money to actually go after some serious tourism economic development, because tourism is our #1 driver. And like I said, one man's deficit is another girl's opportunity for revenue growth, right? So get serious about that. I would say have the consultant go in and interview our hoteliers. What about the carports? Converting the carports that exist today in our current footprint into taking those carports and those garage spaces and converting them into rooms. At $50,000 in revenue, you do the math for your TOT. How many carports exist out there in Morro Bay that could be converted? And I'm talking about hotel carports, porticocheres, windbreaks. Are there other accesses for fire and safety into the parking lots? I would argue that there is. I know of a hotel right now on Main Street that has 3 entrances for clearance for the fire department. Their porticochere could be, carport could be, you could add 3 rooms there. These are small ways of growing revenue, but we need to use the economic development money to look in the footprint that we have to get our revenue growth going quickly, because think about the building infrastructure, the building exists. The building already exists. So you're not having a footprint infrastructure, you're not having an engineering issue, you're going back and you're adding it in the existing footprint. That's growth that we can all commit to. So that's my thought on what the extra money should be used for economic development. In terms of looking at the support for the general fund coming into the bid, I would suggest somewhere in the 70. I'm going to put numbers out there because I think the council's looking for us today to come back to them with some type of concession. And I use concession in a positive way. I don't want that. Maybe concession isn't. Can somebody throw another word out to me? Alternative. Thank you. All kinds of words. We're off thesauruses. Some type of compromise or alternative that the community can support, because $1 million is a big number. I think when we all were at the stakeholder meeting, we saw that $932,000 number come up there. We all went, wow, we get it. And the council probably hears a lot. Why are we putting $1 million towards tourism? I don't have to be in the room. I can understand where they're coming from. It's a lot of pressure to be under. So I support supporting events that are free. And if we talk about what events would go away tomorrow if we cut completely event funding, I can give you a good example of events that didn't exist when we didn't have event funding. The #1 most popular event in this city that everybody says is a terrific event is the Kite Festival. The Kite Festival did not exist before it was funded with tourism dollars. It came in through a partnership with the Chamber and the Farmers Kites and Surreys, or Beachfront Kites and Surreys now. And it came in and it was funded with CPC funding, which is the community promotions money, which was general fund money. And then when that was cut, it was picked up immediately and funded with T-bid funds. It would not exist today as the fantastic festival that we know if it did not get support, because it's free. It doesn't take a purse. It's 2 days, and the revenue that it provides to the city now is terrific. So I'm for funding events. I'm going to put that number back out there at about 75,000. That's about half, and I think within that we can do some really terrific things. And I would say that we should hold a portion of that aside, and we should put an RFP out for a new event to come in on those soft shoulder seasons that can support the revenue growth. Besides the economic development portion, if we make a recommendation today, I think we really do need to make a recommendation on the remaining funds to direct them to do a study about a TOT reinvestment program and growth through the existing footprint. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. One of the things that I have always thought about the sort of the gate events that charge is that we provided seed money for events that can become profitable. And once the events get legs and are on their own, we should let them free and let them on their own and not continue to fund events that are profitable, profit-making events. So I agree with you. I think $75,000 is a fair compromise to maintain the level of what we have. And I agree that we really, again, should split those community and tourist events out and really take a deep look at it, but that's something that I could support.
I would agree with Joan as well. I think we can trim some of these events. My concern here is that, for the past 9 or 10 years, the economy, guys, has been relatively good. What happens when we do hit, and we will hit, another recession? I mean, we're talking about a deficit of over $300,000 now. As a hotelier, I would again emphasize a point that Scott brought up, the VRV issue. As a hotelier, I don't feel that they're paying their fair share. I think that that's money left on the table. They're admittedly saying we'll pay 1.5. Let's fast track that. Let's compromise if we need to. Let's get those funds. The city obviously is struggling, but that just seems like a very easy avenue to solve a lot of problems there.
Thanks, Joan, for that. I agree with most all you said. I would be careful on blanketing the idea of eliminating nonprofits. The vision that I'm formulating, and it's new, is that we want, lack of a better term, because this hasn't been thought out, we're almost selling calendar space, meaning we are going to provide these dates for your event, and be it shoulder season, whatever. We want people to come in that then, personally, I don't care if they make a profit. If they're making a profit, but in turn they can come back to the city that year or next year and say, hey, we did this marketing here, we had this hit here, we did that hit here, we brought in this many hotel rooms. But again, they're creating this excitement to come to Morro Bay. I'm okay if they make a buck. The city might have to consider, are they coming in, are they wrecking our streets and our landscaping and that? So down the road, they might even be paying to come. But at the beginning, to get that ball rolling, I'd like to see that calendar on our beautiful new website, that there's events 300 days out of the 365. Let's fill them in here, and then let them earn the right to come back the next year, is what I'm saying. And I'd be wary of nonprofits. Some of the people I know that make the most money own nonprofits. So be careful on that, just that term alone.
And just a minute. So, and one thing I would just remind the board, they're just looking for a recommendation on a dollar figure. We don't need to get into parameters of our grants at this point. We need to wait till, budgets are approved by council and we have grant funds at that point. And then we can go through the applications and talk about how we want to structure those. Right now, it's just physical dollar back to council of what you agree with that would benefit us and benefit them as well. So public comment? Or anybody else on the board have any comments?
Hi, again me. So I do agree with everything, most of the things Joan said it after looking at this. Amit, yeah. My name is Amit. I have a hotel in town. Been here 10 years. Local residents as well. So yeah, the budget-wise, it is true. I mean, we have had journalists in the past. I mean, that's $25K. let them write, see what it comes out. I mean, rather than bringing more news, see what does that really make any difference? I mean, there are so many ways it is, you can cut the cost. I mean, if those events are, profitable, why do we have to keep funding them again? I mean, even with the Avocado Margarita Festival, I think it started with like, what, $2 to get in or $5, and now it's like 10, 12, and it's been like sold out event. Or figure out, I mean, renegotiate. There's a lot of things in here, most of the stuff I see here, like a digital media, then, there is other places like promotion media, then journalists, maybe, take a time, maybe, look into it, reconsider a lot of, each line item, I would say, salaries and benefits, see if there is something, you can do about that part. There's so many numbers. So, I agree with everything what Joan said, because something similar, I would have said if I was sitting there. Thanks.
Thank you. Susan Stewart. I was actually on the Community Promotions Committee. I was chair of it at the very end of it. I'm currently on Planning Commission, also on the Government Affairs Committee with the Chamber of Commerce. Own a business in town. I'm very grateful to all of you, and I live here too. I'm very grateful to all of you for the kinds of promotion that you're doing for the community. That new website is gorgeous. Really excited to see that coming online. Was interested to hear Lori Keller's comments about talking with the RV parks and the vacation rentals and their interest in seeing any funds they contribute going towards infrastructure and events. I had a similar feeling if we got a business bid going, especially my business is in the downtown or Old Town area. So if we were to do something like that, it's not so much promotion specific that we need as infrastructure improvements. We certainly appreciated the lighting. I'm excited about the signs, wayfinding signage coming forward. We need a public restroom in the downtown, not just a public toilet. We need the kinds of things that make visitors come and stay. I do see lots of people feeling that, well, we've spent a day on the waterfront, and then they come and discover Old Town, spend a day there. So I think there are ways in your marketing to stretch out what we're doing. We're starting to develop a very cool museum path, hopefully. The Historical Society Board, which I'm also on, is working towards developing a historic museum for our community. I think a partnership with the Maritime Museum and with the Natural History Museum. I think we all need to think about all the assets we have. So one of the things, if we could get that assessment with the vacation rentals and RV parks, whether that fund could be targeted for the infrastructure improvements, and maybe they become the event funding. Now, again, that's going to be down the road. That's not going to be in your 1920 budget, but it makes sense to have them buy into the idea, to give them, that's the goal for your money that you're putting in. I am a big believer in diversification, because if we do hit whatever landslides in Big Sur, or whatever major weather events, or whatever could happen that might impact tourism, we as a community want to be there to lift you back up, to make sure our city is still generating funds to keep fire and police and public works going. So I think it's important not to put all our eggs in one basket, and to try and use whatever extra monies can be available to boost the rest of the economy, whether that's by filling some of our larger vacant places, helping get some of these big projects going. I guess that's about all. Oh, cooperative promotion of events. Love that concept of adding in. I do a lot of that just with my own business Facebook page, tag on to whatever I'm seeing that Jennifer's promoting, other businesses in town are promoting, pictures of the otters, pictures, so, and those get a lot of hits just on my little business Facebook page. So I think that kind of cooperative, what different businesses are doing, what different large and small events are doing in town, to have that common message and that common theme going out is huge. So that's all I got to say. Thank you.
One last thing, and then I'll stop it. I like what Amir said. That'd be the perfect world. The Margarita Festival is a perfect example that the city provided funding to that early on. Now it's taken off. If we did cut that funding today, because it is a for-profit, I believe they're for-profit, I'd assume, I don't know where all that money's going, a lot of money being, that they're not going to leave Morro Bay. They have a name, they're here, they're established, they're making $1. I don't think they're going to run to another city and try to start all over again. So that'd be the way of us providing seed money. It's kind of a private-public partnership that everybody talks about now in government. And if we could fill 30 different events a year that way, more the merrier, as far as I'm concerned.
I believe they are nonprofits, Chamber of Commerce. And just another thought, a hotelier spoke earlier about the Oyster Festival and us losing that. So they could take it somewhere else. There is that opportunity. Avila Beach has great facilities for events. And so we need to make sure that we're very careful with how we move forward with these events and keep them here and make them know this is their home and we want them. It's not about that. We want to just make sure we use our dollars really well.
Dinesh Patel from the Morro Crest Inn. I was kind of wondering as far as the funding, and I could be totally off on my thought processes. If we needed the funding, would it be possible to have like the restaurants? I've mentioned this again in the past. Given maybe 1% of what they take in, as opposed to the motels giving in 2 or 3%, just to generate revenue. I mean, someone's going to be paying rent for like $50 a night, whereas suppose they're going to be going out to eat 3 times a day, spending hundreds of dollars. It just seems like all these events that are on a daily basis are generating more revenue for the restaurants as opposed to the motels.
Two things again. Then I agree with you, that yes, event might go away, but what about reconsidering? See if they can reimburse back, see if you can get that money back. Okay, here's the money to start with. If you make money, make profit, just give it back. Whatever you can, 50% or whatever, And then the second thing was, I forgot. Yeah, about the adding. Actually, okay, I got it back. the speeding up the process of vacation rentals thing, the faster you can implement that would be benefit to city. Where limiting out, do that, because even this adding vacation rentals, taking after fall, it just looks like it, it takes longer. I don't know what's the process and stuff, but there is always a way. That's the way I have, came up this far. It's like, I don't, why would we wait? Summer is coming, we don't let the winter go. We don't have money, we borrow, but we fix it up to make sure, it's up and running, and we wait till winter. Wait till summer to, get the money back and pay off, right? So that's another thing, just a process, because if it's just another year, you're going to lose, and then the money, it's still there. And even, again, we had discussed again in the past too, well, reconsidering adding more rooms and stuff, hotel would love to, like every hotel. I'm sure there are so many hoteliers, they know that they can. It's just better than reconsidering raising TOT again, because publicly, the only way I look at it, then every time city run short of money, its hotel is not always been like targeted that okay, let's raise TOT, because that's hurting. Because now with this, that's I think another reason too with a lower ADR too, like. Nobody wants to pay. Like when they see the total comes out, wow, that much. Because I have property in Pismo too, and it's going 1%, from 12 to 13. So we are setting example for entire county. Oh, Morro Bay is charging 15. Let's go ahead and we should charge. They don't have problem. No one's complaining there. They're still busy. They're still making money. Let's raise up here. So we don't want to be like example like that, and then still run on a low ADR, and we just breaking even like every month by month or going down this year, that's, those things will like you guys considered before any kind of taking that step to. Thanks.
Hi, Erica Crawford with the Chamber. I wasn't going to speak. I just heard some, lots of conversation about the Avocado Margarita Festival. The Avocado Margarita Festival, celebrating the avocados that grow just outside of our city limits, that are grown by, many members of our fishing community as well. So there's a real connection to place on that. I just wanted to clarify the gate 2018 pre-sale was $5. The cost at the gate was $7. We have a beneficiary program, and that's why I'm speaking really, because the application closes at the end of this month, and we'd love to get more applications in. This is a profit-sharing program. So Rotary, the Estero Bay Newcomers Club, Morro Bay Aquatics, the Morro Bay High School cheerleaders. These are all, it's over $12,000 that we're donating to local nonprofits, so that we are helping everyone. So I just wanted to make sure that that was in the public record. Thank you.
All right, board. I know that Joan and I have both mentioned a specific dollar amount that we've recommended, and I think it would be prudent for each of you to do the same.
I'd like to say that I do agree with Joan. I think 75,000 is a good starting point to start the discussion. It is disheartening to think that council would want to cut or reduce the funding. It kind of makes it feel that they don't believe that the TBID board can, I guess, prove its ROI with the money that they give us. Moving forward, I did hear some discussions that people would want to include restaurants and other retail aspects to the bid. I feel like that'd be a good place to start so that everyone can see it, and it's not just the hotels that have the bags over their heads, kind of, or on their shoulders. And yeah.
Going through this list, I do agree that it's time to really come up with a strategy for events and a criteria by which they're accepted and go on the schedule to make sure, especially their support in the shoulder seasons. So I think that's actually a good thing. I think that it's time to, sort of say, just because you received event funding one year, it doesn't mean that you're on forever. And so, but I think that there's a real need for criteria of which, so, it's a good idea to say, okay, this is blank. What's the criteria by which you get back on it? And what are the rules of engagement? So that's actually, I think, can be a good thing. But saying that to just go to zero while we are still discussing VR and RV fees is a little daunting, so I think it's unwise to just go to zero. Whether it's, I don't know, I'll go with Joan. I can't really assess what the amount should be, but I know it shouldn't be zero, and it probably shouldn't be less than 75. You get much lower than that, you're just cutting into muscle. So, and you're, as I raised before, you're significantly putting at risk tax dollars. So it really makes no sense. And I want to second what you're saying. It shows sort of it's a very common thing that people don't understand return on investment with marketing. It is a qualitative thing. It is very difficult to assess what exact dollar, the things that you were saying, what exact dollar goes into getting those kids on the beach, and does that return eventually? It's very difficult, but it's we know that it drives revenue, and so I think cutting this at all is really risky. Question: just wanted to confirm, VR and RV fees would go into general fund or go into TBID fund?
It would be part of the assessment the hotel and motels pay into.
Okay. Because, I think that makes sense, to find new revenue streams. I also really like Joan's idea of doing, really looking at how are we driving revenue? How are we driving revenue overall? Just So I think that all of these things could be some good improvements. You know, but I do think we have to be careful not to go to zero. We could really cause some damage.
Because I have faith that the city is working hard to check all their budgetary items, because there is a crisis at hand, I would agree with that $75,000 number.
I'm really not comfortable, plucking an arbitrary number from the air. I do agree, again, that there are events that can be trimmed or can be cut. But honestly, we've been talking about the VR and RV issue for years. I'd like the city to take action on this. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say I would be comfortable, cutting whatever can be added from VR and RVs to the budget. Let's come to a resolution there. I know it's an uncomfortable conversation to have, but let's get that extra funds, and then I would be comfortable with a equivalent cut.
Yeah, I think 75,000 sounds reasonable. Personally, I know we haven't talked about any of the events, but as someone that's been living here, I think for me, I've been living here and there's been multiple crawls. I feel like if we were to cut some events, I think we could. For me, I've never done one of the crawls. I don't think anyone's going to come from Orange County or San Francisco to join a crawl. So that's one thing that when I look at that list of events, I don't think that's really driving revenue. That's not really bringing any guests to my hotel. So yeah, I agree with the 75, and I think if we needed to cut some events, maybe we could look into the crawls.
So I hear Stephen about not just grabbing an arbitrary number and really looking at replacing the revenue with a stream of revenue that would be consistent and likely grow year over year. I don't think we'd be having this conversation right now with the city council. Actually, I know in my mind that we would not be having this conversation right now back and forth with city staff and city council had revenue to the city grown by at least $325,000, right? Okay, so, but somehow we didn't quite get there for the city. And that's a responsibility we have, is to figure out better ways and Nancy, you really put it out there well, better ways to express ROI measurements for this marketing, because that $932,000 number is a very large number for a very small community. And we need to really hold ourselves accountable for it. We need to have revenue growth goals that are separate than a budget number. A budget number is separate than a goal growth. I love the idea of getting the vacation rentals in here for a conversation sooner rather than later. Stephen, you are totally right. But I don't, with what city staff has tasked with the wastewater treatment plant, which is huge. It's a giant undertaking for a very small city staff. With the wastewater treatment plant and some of the other major things that are going on in the community, I don't see this happening before fall. And in my mind, part of the $75,000 number is it's a stopgap measure until we get there with the vacation rentals. It's a stopgap for a next year budget when they come into the fold at whatever percentage and are assisting the lodging community with marketing our fabulous destination. The other thing I really want to stress is that the remaining money, I would love, love, love for this board to recommend to the city council that they really do focus on either having their finance committee or their internal staff, or having an external, I hate to say I'm not even going to say Charlie said it, I didn't say it. Have a really, really well done look at where we can do growth inside of our current footprint. Inside of our current footprint, so that we're not really impacting our residents hugely. So that would, for me, be part of a really terrific recommendation. And then I think that, we should definitely, when it comes back to our budget time, besides setting our budget numbers, we should set a growth number. But right now, to support events, I am okay with the $75,000 number and hope that we can spend some of that, make a recommendation for some of the remaining to have a really good comprehensive look at where we can do some internal growth measures.
Thank you all. Jennifer, where do we go from here?
I just wanted to clarify, because I maybe didn't state it well in the beginning, that budget issue is not a revenue issue, right? I mean, our revenues are actually performing pretty well. It's just they can't keep pace with the severe escalation of costs we have no control over. So in no way is this a reflection upon our hotel industry or our business community. We're actually doing pretty well, all things considered. Even the challenges that I mentioned earlier today, I mean, we're performing well. So there's no reflection upon you, nor any lack of gratitude for what the hotel industry does for our community and for the city. So I just want to put that out there, and I'm speaking for council when I say that, I think. But yeah, I just want to make sure that it's not because you aren't performing well. It's these issues are occurring that we all have to grapple with as a community on the expenditure side. So really appreciate the good dialogue up there, and there's a lot that we can work with on the staff side about how to bring stuff forward as it relates to the event strategy and developing criteria. We're also doing that for community support funding that we do for nonprofits that help low-income folks. We really haven't had a criteria there before, and we're working as staff to create something like that. It's a meager amount. It's only $20,000 or $15,000 that we allocate, but they are meaningful dollars, and we should have criteria to help make good decisions. And same goes for fees that are charged to events, making sure we have good criteria for that as well. So thank you.
We appreciate city staff. I have to tell you, the tone here is so fantastic. This dialogue back and forth with city staff, super appreciative. So I think our city staff does a great job, and especially with the outreach to not only the business community, but there's a lot of residents you guys outreach to. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you all. I'd like to entertain a motion regarding our recommendation to maintain a $75,000.
Did you make the motion? I'd like to make a motion that the T-bid board makes a suggestion to cut funding to the transfers in from the general fund contribution from the current 157 to 75,000.
I second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any abstentions or abstaining? Or a nay? We got one nay.
I just have a quick question. When staff takes this back to city council, will you be taking back an additional, just an additional portion of, I guess, what our conversation was here today, back and forth, or does it just go back as the motion? How does that work?
So the dollar amount goes back as a recommendation to council to be input into their budget process. And if the other discussion you reference is the events, is that what you mean, or is it the how to use the other economic development funds? I mean, I think we can take, the conversation was pretty wide-ranging, but there was some things to note, including that point of really focusing some of those economic development dollars into understanding how to utilize existing hotel stock to raise itself up. But if you want to provide a formal motion, we can also take that as well.
No, I feel confident you're taking it forward, so thank you.
All right, thank you. And we are going to move on to item number B3. Thank you, Scott. Really appreciate your time and all of the information. This is the wine promotion, Wine Merchant Co-op, added value promotion that we're looking for. Jennifer?
Thank you, everyone, for coming. So I think this will be fairly quick, and I'll get you guys out of here. It's been a long morning, I know. So this is the same promotion that we did last year. It's a free bottle of wine for any visitor that stays 2 nights in the month of September and October, if that's the months we choose. And what I'm looking for is just approval to start the RFP process, if you agree that we want to do the wine promotion. Last year, I hand walked it out to all of the appropriate people that could, facilitate the redemption, and I only had one person respond to the RFP. So I'm hoping now that I have physical numbers, because we did one year, that we'll get better response from a couple other downtown vendors.
Jen, can I ask how September, October was chosen?
It's wine month. It's California Wine Month, and the county does a huge wine promotion. We don't have to do September, though. If you want to just start it in October, that's fine, too. I mean,
It's funny, I was thinking maybe October, November, since September numbers are always good.
or just 1 month. We could just go with 1 month. We could just do October, because November does pretty good. We're going into holidays, and people are out of school. I think we ran this right before Thanksgiving last year. So.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
It is good from Thanksgiving on, but that first half of November.
So we could end it Monday, the weekend before Thanksgiving, if you wanted to do that. I have no problem with that.
I just wanted to add, a lot of the guests that did come to the hotel for 2-night stays didn't realize that there was a wine promotion. So they were pretty pleased to have that, but I don't feel that the people that stayed came because there was a wine promotion. To spend extra $80 to $100 for a second night for a $5 bottle of wine was a big kick for them.
Yeah. It's an added value item. They might have seen the ad and it made them go over to look at your hotel, but they might not have remembered it. There's no way to track that, unfortunately, but it is a good added value, and hotel guests like free stuff. So, I know there's at least one hotel on the board that offers wine regularly with room stays and does pretty well. I don't know if you want to comment on how it works for your hotel, Chris?
Better than that, I was just going to say that it's another reason they fall in love with Morro Bay. They don't always know why they fell in love with Morro Bay, but that little bottle of wine might be just the reason that gets them to come back. And another reason why you may want to move it, those later dates we're talking about, it might become a regular thing. I have such a great time every time I come that first week in November. They might not know it's a free bottle of wine, but I think there is a value.
Yeah,
especially if we're not paying for it.
And
right?
for first year, 600 bottles, I'm really happy with that. That's pretty strong for first year. So I would expect it to do better next year. So,
I think this is a great promotion, and I would like to entertain a motion to approve it.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. So everything I've been reading, I like the idea of doing this 1 month, and I like the idea that if we're going to do this, we only do it for 1 month. I'd like to see us reserve the other funding, because everything and you probably all have seen this too, everything I've been reading is that jet fuel prices and gas fuel prices are going to skyrocket significantly, especially through the summer months. That has a direct impact on how many people we actually can get into town. The reason I mention that is because we are a 2.5 to 3.5 at the Outliers 5-hour drive market. Our people all get here by drive. We don't have a train. We don't have a Greyhound bus depot. We don't have an airport. And we don't bring in cruise ships. So our tourists drive here. And if we reserve some of this money, one of the promotions that we did in the past when we started to see less pressure on hotel rooms was to give a gas card as a get. Instead of a bottle of wine, maybe we should consider hang off, and we could always extend it to 2 months at the end of summer. You could extend out November, like Jen really successfully did last year. But if we need those dollars in September to have at least stabilize any situations, we would at least have them to maybe help with a gas promotion or something or maybe the wine promotion, add it back in, whatever would be successful in Jennifer's mind. But maybe just reserve those funds. That's just my thoughts.
Right now, I think what we're trying to get to is an RFP that would go out to wineries to co-op with us. So that's this issue. Anything else would be something separate, like a gas card.
We can talk about it in our marketing plan and budget when that comes.
And I'm fine with gas cards. We've done them before, and they do work. But this issue is wine merchant co-op. Do we have any public comment about the wine merchant co-op program? Seeing none, moving on.
Get the tourists inebriated, they're more likely to stay in the hotels, right? No, we do a wine and cheese at a couple of our properties for 2 hours a night. We've tried to take it away, and it was a fiasco.
Yeah.
They get
They
used
like
to it.
their
They love
wine.
it. They love it. So I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve staff to move forward with an RFP for the wine merchant co-op.
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
Is that for the, I don't know if this is on, is that for the full 2 months? Is that what you wanted for the full 2 months? Who made the motion? I made the motion. Sorry, Stephen, I didn't see who made the motion. Is that, are you saying for the 2 full months?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Second still stand? Any more comment? Any more questions? Any concerns? Seeing none, we're going to call for a vote. All in favor? Aye.
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 That passes. Now we're moving on to a declaration of any future agenda items. Anyone here have anything they'd like to bring up, put on the agenda? I hear silence. I am going to take a look at the clock and say that we are at 11:18, and we're going to call this meeting to adjournment. And I want to thank everybody for being here today, especially my wonderful board. Thank you.
Thank you.